That's a big question. But let me start by asking you to think about what you mean by the environment. What is the environment that we talk about? Whose environment? And the environment is, there is no thing that is the environment. There's nature, there's the earth, there's people, but when we talk about environment, we should talk about somebody's environment. Are we talking about human environment? Are we talking about spotted owl's environment? Are we talking about the tree's environment? So let me tell you what I talk about, because I don't know what other people talk about. I have my suspicions. I talk about the human environment. And the question is, how do we protect the human environment? And what are the threats to human environment in modern times? Well, most of the threats that we knew 200 years ago, 300 years ago, technology, industrialization, have cured us from. So we actually today live in the best human environment from a health and well-being perspective in all of human history. There's never in human history been a time where we have been healthier, where we have breathed cleaner air, where we have drunk better water, where we have eaten better food. Never in the history of mankind. And we've got 6+ billion people on the planet. So, a gazillion times more people than there were hundreds of years ago, certainly thousands or tens of thousands of years ago. The air we breathe is much better than it was in the cave. It's much better than it was around a bonfire. It was certainly much better than it was in the subsistence farm where there was manure everywhere and there were rats everywhere, and it was just a disgusting place to live. It's even better than London in the 19th century, where instead of exhaust from automobiles, what you had was piles of horse manure. And it wasn't like Disneyland where the horses walk by and they poop and somebody comes up with a little broom and sweeps it up. No, it just sat there. And there were no sewage systems because there was no wealth or technology to create sewage systems. So human sewage ran through the streets as well. So look, first we have to set the context. Human environment is unbelievably good right now. So I assume what you're concerned about, and what I think people should be concerned about, is how do we make sure that people don't put stuff into the air that hurts us, that really damages our health? How do we make sure people don't put stuff into the water that makes us sick? So clean air, clean water, those are the real issues that I take as legitimate concerns about the human environment in a laissez-faire capitalist economy. So let's start with this. I think that the number one thing that we have to do, or that I think serves to protect us, are property rights. Properly defining property rights. So if you have properly defined property rights, for example, over water, and if we privatize all the water, right? We privatize the lakes, and we privatize the rivers, and we privatize the ocean, and we privatize the waterfront. Now you have people who can claim damages if somebody, pollutes upstream. Now you have an issue of rights. Now you have an issue of people being able to make a claim against somebody responsible. And not only it's not only about the quality of the water, but for example, if we had proper property rights over fishing rights over a river, now you could argue about how we're going to use the water. We're going to use the water for the fish, or we're going to use the water to irrigate agriculture. The standard then becomes contracts and property right law. It doesn't because the government doesn't have a role other than in setting up these foundations. And at that point, water's going to be clean because you're not going to pollute my water. I'm going to make sure that you don't. And if you do, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to take you to court, and I'm going to demand retribution. But well before that, we're going to have a contract. We're going to deal with this. This is how it was in the 19th century, where cattle ranchers and towns and farmers had to resolve disputes that had to do with property rights over water flows. In those days, this was all privatized, and the courts handled this, and that's how it was resolved. It gets a little trickier with air, and one has to be, I think, creative about thinking about property rights and how they relate to air. And I don't have the answer about how you do that. I don't have the answer in the detail about how you do it in water. I just know what it's been done before is a little trickier. But I think this is the principle. If you can show that the activities of person X or company Y or person or company X, Y, and Z actually cause you physical harm, actually causing you to be sick, then you have legal retribution against them. You have a legal avenue to go after them. But the burden of proof is on you to show that it's harmful to you. If there is a common action that all, let's say, industries are performing that is clearly, unequivocally hurting human life, right? And that restricting it is not going to end industry as we know it, then I can imagine the government having a role in saying, you know what, you're hurting the lives of all these people. You can't spew cyanide into the air beyond X amount, right? So you can imagine a scenario, but again, the burden of proof is going to be very, very high for these kind of things. It's not going to be the kind of burden of proof that I think exists today. So government can have a role, but it's a much, much smaller role, and the burden of proof is going to be far different than exists today. However, if the activity is such that eliminating it is actually going to stop an industrialization, or actually going to be such that progress is made impossible, then there's no way government can step in, and there's no way the courts can step in. I'll give you an example of this. Imagine you're in mid-19th century London, and the factories are spewing out coal dust. There's coal dust in the air. And I think I'm not sure of this, but I'm pretty certain that when you breathe that stuff in, it does harm to your health. It's not good for you, and it actually damages you. Imagine stopping it at that point. Imagine telling everybody they couldn't use coal anymore. Look, the technologies for filtering did not exist. The costs were impossible. The only way to stop this harm was to stop using coal. That would have been the end of the Industrial Revolution, and everybody's lives would be worse off. So your health is a little hurt by the fact that humanity is progressing, including you. Your life in total is going to be better off. That's, in a sense, a price that is being paid. You live in Los Angeles, and everybody's driving cars, and they're spewing out whatever comes out of cars. And I'm willing to acknowledge that it's not pleasant and may be harmful to your health, right? Live somewhere else. You know, you don't have to live in Los Angeles. That is the price of living in LA, just like it was the price of living in London to breathe that soot in. For the government to step in and say, no, you know, we're going to regulate every last chemical that comes out of that exhaust because the quality of life of Los Angeles is being reduced. That's ridiculous. If your quality of life is lower, go live in Wyoming. That's why Wyoming exists. It exists for Californians who don't like, you know, car exhaust pollution. So there are plenty of places around the world where you can breathe better air than in Los Angeles. Make that choice. But you don't have the right to stop all the automobiles in LA, to stop, you know, everybody else from driving because it doesn't suit your quality of life. It's a choice that you then have to make. So to summarize, I think most issues of pollution and real issues of human environment get dealt with through the issue of property rights. And I'm not saying it's easy. Now, I'm not saying I have all the answers to how we do it through property rights. This is an issue that philosophers of law and courts and individuals and contracts are going to have to evolve and have to deal with under laissez-faire capitalism. Second, the government might have a role when there is a specific risk, it's well identified, the risks are known, the damage is known, and making a change is not destructive, is not hugely destructive. And third, you have a choice. You can choose to not go into the restaurant where people are smoking, to not live in a city where people are driving a lot of cars, to not be in a city where there's a lot of coal in the air. You have a choice to change your lifestyle and to go somewhere else. So that's how I think issues of human environment get dealt with. Let me just say one quick word about spotted owls. If you care about spotted owls, buy some. and create the environment, buy the environment. Under capitalism, you'll be able to do this. Buy a wood, buy a forest, and raise your spotted owls there. I don't care about the spotted owl's environment. It doesn't. All I care about is the human environment. So, if you care about the environment of other species, then you should have the ability to take care of it without interfering with my rights to live the kind of life I want to live.